Attention, you're listening to the Todd Huff Radio Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk radio. Be advised that the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. Here's your conservative, but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Well, that is right, my friends. Hour 2 of the program today. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for joining us. I want to talk. There's a ton of stuff in the stack of stuff. I want to get to the tariffs. I want to get to, my goodness, some stuff with Doge. We'll see where else we can get with this today. I'll be as quick as I can, moving through these issues, hitting the high points, and moving along here in the second hour of the program. Before we get started, though, my friends, if you love seafood, listen up. Kenai Fish is your new go-to for wild-caught seafood, straight from the waters of Alaska. You know, I was reading in all of this discussion about tariffs. There's an extraordinary amount of importing that is involved with seafood. I didn't know this. Apparently, we're importing a lot of things, a lot of seafood, but this is not imported. I know some on the left don't realize Alaska is a state in the United States, but Alaska is a state. We purchased Alaska from Russia years ago, and they provide the folks at Kenai Fish in Alaska this Alaskan seafood. This is not your grocery store freezer aisle stuff. It's not the stuff that's getting smacked with the tariffs right now. We're talking salmon from the legendary Kenai and Castle Bluff rivers, sockeye, coho, king salmon, all of it vacuum sealed, shipped to you, wherever you are in the United States, landlocked or not, shipped to you next day air for unbeatable freshness. If you're a fan of halibut, you're in for a treat as well. They've got a salmon that's mild, a halibut that's mild, sweet, and perfect for grilling or baking or even air frying. And don't forget their shellfish. They've got king crab, they've got snow crab, scallops, and more. Kenai Fish, family owned, and they are as passionate about quality as you are, my friends, about this great nation. So go to KenaiFish.com, Kenai, that's how you spell Kenai, KenaiFish.com. Use promo code Todd. You will save 15% on your purchase there. Kenai Fish, KenaiFish.com. Folks, this is seafood that will have you hooked. I love saying that. Kenai Fish, Kenai, KenaiFish.com, promo code Todd. All right, so let's talk a little bit here about the latest developments, if you will, with tariffs. So the good news is that there's a lot of movement for people that want to negotiate, want to talk with Trump about the tariffs. In fact, according to the administration, there could be up to 70 nations that are now prepared to talk with Trump about these tariffs, to negotiate a deal, and to try to get this issue solved. Remember what Trump's trying to accomplish. We've gone through this a lot. I don't want to go through that again, but I do want to say, because I got to keep in mind, we've got people tuning in at various points in this program. They don't listen to every show, both hours, every day, which is a big mistake, I would say. But I will say this. If I was to summarize it, what Trump is trying to do, not just with tariffs, not just with the international trade, the trade deficit and all that, but with a lot of things, a lot of Trump's issues are to care about putting the needs and interests of Americans first. This is America First policy. It says, why are we letting these folks damage our ability to do business with them? Why are we letting them penalize our companies and our abilities for our companies and our workers to prosper by international trade? Why do we allow the obstacles to be set up between them and the consumers in these other countries, and we don't do the same thing here, right? It's not necessarily, some people are big fans of tariffs, but you don't have to be a fan of a tariff to say, I'm a fan of using a tariff if one's being used against me. So, I mean, it's like, you don't have to be a fan of fighting, but if some dude comes up and co-cocks you, I know a lot of people that are going to punch back, as well you should, to defend yourself. Look, I'm not trying to start a fight, but I will finish it. That's kind of the way Trump's looking at this. They're the ones that started these tariffs. We're putting into place reciprocating tariffs. And now, if you're going to have a problem with our tariffs, then look in the mirror. That's basically the way that this is being handled and addressed. Now, Scott Bessent was on with Fox Business, and he's the Secretary of the Treasury, by the way. He said almost 70 countries have now approached us wanting to help rebalance global trade. Almost 70 countries. That is a good thing. So there's a lot of movement, but it's not all roses, my friends. We've got China, who has responded a couple of different ways. First, here, this is at Breitbart.com. It says this: China cuts off rare earth mineral exports to the U.S. in trade war with Trump. You'll remember, this should spark thoughts in your mind, memories in your mind, that Trump has had conversations. This has come up with Ukraine. Some of these rare earth minerals that are in Ukraine, Trump's talked about that being payment to the United States for us helping Ukraine and all this sort of stuff. That's been going on for a while now. And now you've got this, and now you can understand how the two are, of course, connected. China's retaliation, the article says here at Breitbart.com, against President Donald Trump's tariffs includes more export controls on rare earth materials, which are vital to electronics and battery manufacturing. China says, look, we're going to take away the components so that it's harder for you. These rare earth materials are obviously critical to the production of these electronics. So we're not going to export these to you. You're going to have a harder time securing these. It's going to be more expensive. So now your costs are going to be going up. So it's basically, they're trying to play a financial game here, balancing act to say, look, if you're going to make it harder for us to import things into your country, we're going to make it harder for you to get it done elsewhere, including doing these things potentially by yourself. The Chinese government said over the weekend it will maintain its supply of rare earths to the rest of the world while limiting U.S. access to the minerals. China is the world's dominant producer of rare earth materials, accounting for about 70% of the world's supply at the moment. That's astronomical. Now, a couple things here. Like, you don't have to be an economist to understand, first of all, we live in a dynamic world. We don't live in a static world. So when something like this happens, and this is something that's often lost on the left. In fact, let me give you a little bit of an insight on this. The left, when they look at, say, for example, raising additional revenues, raising taxes, they'll say, well, this is how things are today. And so we'll just tax this person a little bit more. There it is right there. I can see that's where that money is. That's where it's going. We'll just tax this activity a little bit more and we'll get that money in return. Well, what happens is, obviously, because you're a human being and you don't just live in some intellectual abstract universe, you live in reality, you know that if people are being penalized for certain things that they do with their money, they are going to adjust. Now, some people will continue doing it. Maybe all people will continue doing the activity at a lower level. Maybe some will quit it all, stop doing it altogether, thereby taking that money that the left was relying upon to come in the form of taxes. It vanishes because the thing that you've disincentivized people to do it. And so this is what happens in economics, and it's really fascinating because it can have a chain reaction down the line that some people it can be impossible at some point to predict. But if 70% of the world's rare earth minerals are coming from China, and if China is not going to be importing them to the United States because of, again, retaliating on Trump's tariffs, then that potentially opens the door for a number of things. Maybe it helps facilitate what Trump's been talking to Ukraine about. I don't know where this goes. And that's kind of the point. It kind of illustrates a larger problem that exists with lovers of big government because they think that they can manage all of it as though it's predictable. But the reality is they can't. They can't do that because every time you try to assume, your assumption is, that the world is static, that behavior will remain unchanged, and you say, I'm going to rely upon this percent of revenue to come from this activity, you're going to disincentivize it whenever you add taxation to it. And so people stop doing it a little bit, a lot, maybe altogether. And in a way, the opposite happened during the Prohibition back in the early 1900s when they prohibited the sale of alcohol. And what happened? There was a response, and people started doing it illegally, quote unquote. And it was a whole thing, and it created violence where people were protecting their ability to engage in that activity, to make money. I mean, people respond in ways that are in their own interests, which again, I talked about a lot of that yesterday. So I don't know where this will end up specifically, but I do know that it opens the door for other folks around the world to start producing, to start delivering supply of the rare earth materials or minerals, I should say. And that could be further hampering China's economy if they're going to lose market share on that. This is all fascinating to me. The article continues. It says that China controlled 90% of the market a decade ago. So they've lost 20% of it, but they had virtually all of it. But alternative suppliers have ramped up production. See, that's what's going to happen. This will force these sorts of things to happen. It's the same thing that happened, again, in a way, with Obamacare. When there was talk of going to single payer, I remember Rush talking about this. You go to single payer, and there's a problem, and the American people say, we want our health insurance back. The insurance industry just isn't sitting there waiting for you to come back to it. It's been annihilated. It's been destroyed. The people who would have lost their investments by going to single payer, right, because they lost their health insurance business, they're not sitting. They've moved on to other things. They've had to survive. They've had to adjust. And so then you're stuck with a world where you have a single payer and no competition, which only allows for an environment where costs will go up and services will drop in quality and so forth. And so the point is that when we look at these issues, there's a whole bunch of facets to consider. Some of these, look, I can't predict this. And even the best economists in the world can't predict every move that's going to be made. You can think it through and you can see how it still puts a lot of pressure, I think, on China. I think that we're holding the cards here. We have the bigger economy. They import things a lot more than we import them there. So the tariffs are going to hit them harder. I know the businesses here are paying those, but it's going to hurt their ability to sell to U.S. businesses who are importing things because the tariff's going to, at some point, push people away to make other decisions. Maybe they stop offering the product. Maybe they find another producer in another country. Maybe there's a way to produce some of it here. I don't know, but it puts more pressure on China. They stand to have more to lose here, especially with the supply of rare earth minerals. And it would be a good thing. This world is so reliant upon technology. To have a country like China controlling a critical part of the supply of this, it just seems foolish. I mean, these are the sorts of things, too, on Trump's bigger thoughts and plans on the economy. There are certain things that we should be producing here in the country, not relying upon to come from outside this country, because if we're in wartime, God forbid, then you think China is going to give us the tools for us to continue to build our technological dominance over China? Or are they going to withhold it, make it harder to get, impossible to get, cut it off altogether? Anyway, so these are the things that are fascinating. These are the responses. The United States still is holding the cards, but there are certainly some bad things that we're having to navigate. But most of the folks are headed to the negotiating table here with the United States. Now, on top of that, you may have seen this as well. RedState.com, Europe scrambles to make a deal, ready to talk tariffs with Trump. In a turn of events that would make Monty Hall smile, this is Red State, Ward Clark is who wrote this. The European Union is reportedly indicating that they are ready to meet with Trump, the Trump administration, to make a deal on tariffs. This was very likely the president's goal all along, and if it's true, it appears to be working. Yes, look, it is the president's goal. I think he's made this clear. I don't think there's any conjecture or guessing that is necessary here. He's made it clear to us that he's tired of how the world has been treating the United States unfairly. This goes into a lot of areas. This goes into how the world expects the United States military to defend them, how European countries expect defense, the United States to basically be a huge part and a factor in NATO funding. Trump's over here saying, why are we doing all the heavy lifting? They're the ones who have the bigger need. It's their back door. Not to say the United States isn't allied with those countries, not to say that the United States wouldn't have some interest in some sort of treaty or whatever, but to say that we're on the hook for defending Europe is something that Trump says is just not fair to the United States of America. Why don't the rest of you European socialist utopias get together and figure out how to take care of yourselves? That, by the way, is a good principle to have, right? Give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man a fish, you feed him for a lifetime. And that is what we're after here. This idea of self-sufficiency in a healthy way, not in a way that says I can do everything alone. I don't need any international, working together or alliances or friendships. Of course we want those things. But to say that the United States has to be the one to carry the burden on everything. I'm talking trade. I'm talking anytime there's a new push for some environmental stuff, it always puts the heaviest burden on the United States of America. The heavy cost, the improving our already drastically better quality of environmental standards than much of the world has today. They put a heavier burden on the United States of America, heavier cost on the United States of America. They guilt trip the United States of America on all sorts of things, on immigration. We are the most generous nation on earth when it comes to immigrants. And yet we are treated as though we're the ones who are at fault for wanting to secure our border and to deport those who are here illegally, when that is just common sense and enforcing current laws on the books. Trump says all of this stuff is done. And now he's actually getting movement here. Starting point of negotiations are people saying that they want 0% tariffs, which is a remarkable thing to behold, I might add, because it's not something that, some people thought we would never get here. Some people thought that this was, Trump's negotiating now, so now that's the starting point of the negotiation. You should have done this sooner. Where were these countries earlier? Did they think Trump was joking? I mean, this is, you could blame Trump for, I guess, for calling attention to this and forcing it, but these nations could have done this at any time. They could have come to the table. This could have been all avoided, but it wasn't. They just simply, my friends, do not care. So, lots to say today, my friends, lots to go through as well. But before I do that and continue this conversation with you today, let me remind you that we have launched here at the program Freedom Marketplace. Freedom Marketplace is a directory of businesses that share conservative principles, businesses that are pushing in the same direction you are. I find it incredibly discouraging, and I don't get disheartened, but I get disheartening as well whenever I realize that businesses that I might have purchased something from are taking those profits and supporting the causes and the candidates that are antithetical to the things that I believe. That is discouraging at best, and there's something that we can do about it. Look, I'm not a cancel culture guy. I don't want to say this person didn't do everything that I think they should do, therefore let's boycott. How about instead of that, we say, listen, there's realities. You shop where you need to shop, but be mindful of the people that are pushing in the same direction. These are a lot of people who have small businesses. They have innovative ideas. They have products that simply haven't gotten the mass marketing appeal of some of these bigger corporations and so forth. And it's an opportunity sometimes to find a hidden gem, sometimes to find a quality product or service that you didn't know existed before that you really like. And so that's what Freedom Marketplace is about. freedommarketplace.net, that's the website. You can go there. It's free. It's there's nothing required. You can go and shop and find businesses that are pushing in the same direction that you are. freedommarketplace.net. Check it out today. Liberty and business for all, my friends. So, as I look here at the stack of stuff, there's a bunch of things that are vying for my attention. One of the things I referenced off the top was this article at Fox News. I think I mentioned it off the top of the first hour. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton announces a run for the U.S. Senate. So Ken Paxton, of course, has become quite popular, the Attorney General of Texas. He's now thrown his name in the hat against John Cornyn. Now, Cornyn is, it's interesting to me. Cornyn he's not a principled conservative. And I've recently spoke to this in general. I think that these primaries are a good and healthy thing. And I would like to see the Republican nominee be the most conservative person that can win in the general election. Ken Paxton obviously has won statewide races in Texas, and so that's a candidate that can certainly win such an election. And so I think that this is a good thing. I would like to see this happen in even more states, even in states here like where I am in Indiana. I would like to see someone run against Indiana incumbent Senator Todd Young. There's a lot of other states where Republicans have rhino candidates, or they have moderate candidates, or maybe they even have liberal Republican candidates. And look, we have to deal with realities. We can't always get what we want. Sometimes the reality is that the rhino is going to win. I don't want to burn bridges, but I do want to save this country. The policies that Trump is pushing and promoting are the types of policies that we need to continue to support, and we need people who are pushing in the same direction. So maybe a few more words about that on the other side of the break. I'm just against the clock here, my friends. So much more to get to here this hour of the Todd Huff Show. Sit tight. You are listening to Conservative, Not Bitter Talk. I'm your host, Todd Huff, back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Second segment here, this second hour. I want to continue briefly talking about what we ended the last hour with, which is this idea that we're trying to move the Republican Party further to closer to conservative principles overall. So if you've listened to this program for a while, or if you've followed politics, you know that there is a battle for control of both the Democrat and the Republican Party. In the Republican Party, it's conservatives versus rhinos. Rhino, by the way, if you don't know, is an acronym that stands for Republican in name only, R-I-N-O, rhino. Meaning they have the name Republican, but they don't really believe in the conservative Republican issues that many people associate with the Republican Party today. And so they have the name, but they're empty suits. There's no real principle there. There's no real fight there. They just kind of want the position. And if they're good politicians, or better yet, good campaigners, they might win the seat by making the right messaging, by making the right promises. And then we're stuck, unable to move things forward with this unique opportunity that we have. Same thing's happening on the left side of the aisle. The left side of the aisle the Democrat Party abandoned the working class, opting instead to support a group of single-issue voters, a group of voters that have really nothing in common, and instead becoming fully engaged in a broad range of issues to bring people on board. You find the issue the series of issues that people care the most about. One issue like the LGBTQIA plus movement, right? Speak to that movement, and you've got that group of people that are committed to electing you politically for a long, long time. You can pander to other groups, you can talk, and you can use identity politics to, bring these groups, these fringe groups in to support the Democrat Party, and there's no real coherence to the party's ideology except for it's just extreme. That you've brought in the extreme fringes and the single issue voters and the people who are scared of the Republican Party because you've demonized the party through the 7 pillars of propaganda for so long that that's what's happening. So there's a fight within that party as well because the radical left wants to run it even further to the left. They've been controlling it, and they have pushed that party even further to the left in recent years than they have in prior decades and years. So there are more moderate Democrats or even liberal Democrats that are fighting for control of their party, and they are currently not doing well. However, all of the data indicates that the left needs to move to the right. Now, of course, not as far right as I think they should move, but away from the leftist wokeism and crazy socialistic talk. But meanwhile, because of this battle within the party, the folks that are at the forefront leading the party, the biggest voices, the most recognizable faces are the most extreme. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders, Tim Walz, Jasmine Crockett, which I've got her in the stack of stuff. I don't know if I'll get to it. It's in the stack of stuff. Again, it's just remarkable, some of the things that she's out there saying. But so there's a battle for both control of both the Democrat and the Republican Party. And of course, there's a battle for control politically of this nation between Democrats and Republicans. So there's a lot of things going on here. But if you break it down to the Republican Party and you say, look, we want to maintain control of the Senate, we want to maintain control of the House, but that's not really enough. We want people who are going to be furthering the agenda, the conservative agenda, Trump's agenda, the things that are at the top of his list are clearly things that the vast majority of conservatives would agree with: securing the border, addressing the economy, cutting taxes, cutting spending, reducing the size and scope of government. This is all in the wheelhouse, right in the dead center bullseye of what conservatives want to see happen and have wanted to see happen in this country for a long time. And candidly, maybe a little bit shocked that we're at that point where we can actually begin to see this as a real possibility. And so into the races jump people like Ken Paxton. I mentioned here in Indiana, I'd like to see someone as well who is going to challenge Todd Young from a more conservative, a more principled conservative position. There's lots of other people in the Senate and even in the House as well. And this matters for a couple of reasons. Number one, let me say this, and I made this comment maybe a month ago. I said to you, I was considering, and listen, there is a permanent olive branch between me and the rhinos, the moderate Republicans. I think they need challenged. I think they need pushed. I think they need to be told when they're wrong. I think they need to have some healthy pressure applied to them. But I'm not trying to burn a bridge. And I thought for a while, and I still think about this. If these folks, let's take Todd Young, for example. If he's going to run for re-election, and if it's a foregone conclusion that he's going to be the nominee, maybe there can't be a candidate fielded against him. I'm not saying that that's the case. I'm just saying that might be reality. We're going to have to work with these folks that are not as principled, not as conservative, that are, I don't know, just that have more in common with Democrats on some issues. So I have an offer of peace. I don't want war, but I also want victory for the American people. And that includes having candidates that are not going to do, and here's where it begins to break down. So Milton Friedman I remember listening to an old clip of him talk about this, and he said, we shouldn't look for people who we think are, the perfect sort of candidate politically. Instead, we should focus all of our efforts on holding that person accountable, because that is going to have a bigger impact and a result than simply trying to find the perfect person, electing them and then going about our business. That's not the way that this country is designed to work. And Friedman is absolutely right on that. We have to be engaged. That's one of the reasons. Look, I'm not against term limits by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm against term limits if people think that term limits are going to be the solution to the problem, because the people in government who are going to be pushed out by a term limit, they are going to figure out a system whereby they can continue to be a part of the beast if we allow them to be. We are the ones that have to be engaged. If we're looking to term limits to say we don't really want to be engaged and hold people accountable and that sort of thing, then it is absolutely the worst thing. I'm not against please don't misunderstand. I'm not against the term limits. People don't need to make a career out of this, but they shouldn't make a career out of this because we've removed them through the election process, and not simply because we think we can put in a fail-safe and fix this problem, because it's not going to be the way that it works. The people in D.C., the lovers of big government, will find a way to create a new system whereby they're still operating within the deep state. I fully believe that. And so there's this dilemma here. We have to find, Reagan said, we should be voting for the most conservative Republican that can win on the ballot. And we shouldn't be trying to destroy Republicans, because that actually could hurt us in the general election. There's a lot of things going on here, and I understand. But I also understand we're at a breaking point in this country, where the actions being taken by Trump, this may quite literally be our last chance to fix these problems. And so I want to lead to this story here. Now, this is in Congress, but you'll get my point. This happens in both chambers. Headline here, wokespy.com, GOP congressman to sabotage Trump's tariff authority with new legislation. I'm just going to read from a bit of this. Rhino Congressman Representative Don Bacon announced on Sunday that he will introduce new legislation to block President Donald Trump's reciprocal tariffs on countries that have taken advantage of the United States. On Wednesday, Trump announced the implementation, this would have been last week, of a 10% baseline tariff on all imports, and the worst offenders will be hit by even tougher measures. The president proclaimed April 2nd as Liberation Day, which will restore America's economic independence, vitalize domestic manufacturing, and protect American jobs. Trump also released a detailed chart that showed how American workers were being ripped off. So then Bacon goes on an interview with CBS's Margaret Brennan, yes, that Margaret, and he said that he's introducing a bill to halt Trump's tariff agenda. It was modeled on legislation introduced by Senator Chuck Grassley, Republican from Iowa, and far-left Senator Maria Cantwell from the state of Washington. And so, listen, there is a time for Congress to certainly pass laws to, limit the power of the presidency, but this is not it. This is what needs to be done to affect change. You're hampering what needs to be done, and it's dangerous to elect people who aren't principled and committed and strong, and who will succumb to political pressures when the going gets a little bit tough, leaving us short of the goal. That's why principled leadership, principled representatives, principled congressmen need to be in Washington, D.C., because it is a multifaceted, complex issue. I've got to take a break, my friends. Sit tight. Back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. I don't know how to set this up. I've mentioned this off the top of the program. Here we are at the end, the final segment of the program, and I just feel like I have to get to it. So you've heard me talking a little bit about some the folks that are leading the Democrat Party today, the voices that lead the party, the AOCs, the Bernie Sanders, who are out there flying first class to tell the people that they are falling to the oligarchy. You've got Tim Walz out there who's calling quite literally. I've had that soundbite for a while. I'm not going to get to that. May not get to it at all, but he actually said he hopes that there's a shadow government that gives an alternative press conference to correct the things that the administration has seen. You talk about someone who has no understanding, or at least no interest in understanding the foundation and, well, the way that our government works. That is it. But they've got these leftists running the show out there being the spokespeople. Representative Jasmine Crockett, I'll add to that list. I've got a soundbite from her that I'll get to that is, I mean, I don't even know what to say about this. I'm going to play it here in a minute. But friends, let me remind you, I know you care about this country. I know you care about your family. I know you care about your business, your job, your church, your community. Care about your health. I know you do. It's easy, though, sometimes to ignore the maintenance, especially as we get older, we get busy. I have fallen into this category as well. But taking care of ourselves is critically important. That's why I take Salty. It's a all-natural product that has been clinically proven. As I say, science has spoken, and it has been clinically proven to lower cholesterol safely. It's not a drug. You don't need a prescription. You don't need to go to the doctor. Nothing wrong with those things. There might be a time and place for those things. But this is a great first step. It is affordable. It is all natural. It has been proven to work. You might be worried about your cholesterol. You might have had high cholesterol. You might have a history of people in your family with high cholesterol or heart issues. This is a great first place to start. We need healthy, strong Americans, my friends. You need to be that for your family, for your work, your business, your faith, your church, your community. But folks, we need you for this nation as well. Need you to stay healthy and strong. Do not let high cholesterol keep you down. Salty.com is where you can go. SOLTEA. I take Salty. You can as well. It's very affordable. In fact, they even give you the additional bonus of saving 50% off your first order and get free shipping if you use promo code Todd during the checkout process. Salty.com, SOLTEA. Promo code Todd gets you the discount and the free shipping. Check it out, my friends. I think you'll appreciate taking the product. And I'd love to hear about the success, because I know that there's plenty of evidence to show that it's lowered cholesterol, and we want to hear your stories of success as well. So check it out, salty.com, promo code Todd. All right, so the time I have remaining, I'm going to play this clip. Now, first of all, I want to point out Jasmine Crockett, radical leftist, insane radical leftist from Texas, Democrat. She is speaking here at Grace Baptist Church in Connecticut, which suddenly the Democrats are now okay again with there not being a wall of separation between church and state when people like Jasmine Crockett take to the podium and say things like this. Folks, I've got no words for this. I don't even know what to say after I play this, but here she is at the podium talking about immigrants, talking about being done with picking cotton. Here it is.
So I had to go around the country and educate people about what immigrants do for this country, or the fact that we are a country of immigrants.
Right.
The fact is, ain't none of y'all trying to go and farm right now. Okay, so I'm lying. Raise your hands.
She's looking at the audience with suspicion.
You're not.
You not.
We done picking cotton. We are. You can't pay us enough to find a plantation.
I know that's right.
Okay. We done picking cotton. You not finding us working at farms. I mean, this is... So I guess what she's saying is that since Americans are no longer picking cotton, that illegal immigrants should be allowed to come in and pick... You know how offensive this is on every level? And I want to say, just for the record, in case there's a knucklehead out there listening, obviously what has been done in the history of this country with slavery as it pertained to things like picking cotton is an inexcusable mark on the history of this country. This affected the lives and freedom and prosperity of Black Americans, and it was reprehensible. But you know what else is reprehensible? This. I'm reminded as I listen to this stupid, ridiculous soundbite. First of all, what's wrong with farming? I was a horse farmer. I shoveled manure. I worked on managing a 200-acre farm. I've stacked hay before. I've picked sweet corn before. As a kid, I've worked on farms. What is wrong with working on farms? I know plenty of farmers that do quite well working on farms. Farming, whether they have livestock, hogs, property, they have corn and beans here in my part of the country. I have a friend who does farm cotton in Georgia. I mean, what is she? Of course people farm. What is she even talking about? Of course, she's trying to have a racial connotation here, but the irony is that she's saying the people that should do these types of jobs are the ones who are here illegally because none of us want to do that. This is crazy thinking, and it's candidly condescending to a group of people. Why you would put a group of people for any career and say, this is what you're supposed to do here in the United States of America is beside me. But Jasmine Crockett thinks apparently it's a good thing to do. I'm out of time. SDG.